Hello, once again. It's Andrew here from the Revisionist Almanac. Now, at the start of every month, I'll spend some time giving you a window into what I watched over the previous month, both new and old, and share my thoughts on some of those films. Now, before we get into this, though, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel on whatever podcast platform you're using, as well as rating and reviewing the show. In addition to that, you can also find the show on every major social media platform, including Instagram, Twitter X, and TikTok using the handle at Rev Almanac. And with that out of the way, let's get into some of my first time watches for June. We'll kick things off with The First Omen, directed by Arkasha Stevenson and currently available to watch on Hulu. I am a believer in this film. The movie is a direct prequel to the classic 1976 horror film The Omen, which was directed by Richard Donner and starred Gregory Peck, and told the story of a family who adopt a newborn baby, and unbeknownst to them, that child Damien is the Antichrist. Now, we currently live in an era with far too much recycling of ideas and studios just trying to capitalize on successful IP. But if we continue to get gems like The First Omen, I think I can accept wading through all that crap knowing stuff like this is out there. The film stars Nell Tiger Free, who gives everything in her role as the lead character. And for people unfamiliar with the original film and how it starts, I'm not going to go into spoilers other than to say this movie does very well to give enough lore and backstory and run right up to the events of the original film. I am shocked how good the final product is, and I also now would be okay seeing another film in the franchise, given the quality of The First Omen and the open thread it left for the potential to make at least one more. Also, a huge shout out to The First Omen for paying homage to one of my favorite horror films of the 1980s, 1981's Possession, with a scene that wears its influence directly on its sleeve, but it's also totally warranted given the commitment by Nell Tiger Free. My score for The First Omen is an 8.4 out of 10. The second movie I got around to in June was Atlas, which is a new science fiction movie starring Jennifer Lopez, currently available to stream on Netflix. Quite honestly, this movie was so middling that it actually felt like it was created entirely by artificial intelligence. So, for my review, I took the same approach and I decided I'd have AI write up a review instead of me wasting my time. What I did was I asked ChatGPT to write me a generic 3 sentence movie review about a generic JLo sci fi movie, and here is what ChatGPT gave me on the first attempt. Jennifer Lopez captivates as a fearless protagonist in this action packed science fiction adventure, navigating a futuristic world with both grit and grace. The film boasts impressive visual effects and a thrilling storyline, keeping viewers on the edge of their seats. Though the plot may follow familiar territory, Lopez's dynamic performance ensures it remains engaging and memorable. I'd like to take back what I said. AI might have actually made a better film than what we got from Atlas. The movie is a giant and complete waste of your time, and my score for the film is a dismal 4.0 out of 10. The next movie I got around to was Back to Black, which is the Amy Winehouse music biopic and directed by Sam Taylor Johnson, which is currently available to watch on digital. Well, I have to at least say it's better than the Bob Marley biopic from earlier this year, and bonus points for the lead actress doing her own singing, which is something I'm a stickler for when it comes to the music biopic genre. But seriously, why did we need this version of the iconic singer's tragic life story? The movie keeps these stories so superficial that you watch the film and don't learn a single thing about the actual woman behind the voice. So if you have any interest in learning about Amy Winehouse, be it as a fan of her music or just a casual movie watcher, avoid Back to Black entirely and seek out the vastly superior 2015 documentary Amy, which was directed by Asif Kapadia. That film is truly capable of capturing the essence of the iconic singer, warts and all. My score for Back to Black is a modest 6.0 out of 10. I then got around to Boy Kills World, which is a new action movie starring Bill Skarsgård and directed by Moritz Moore, which is available right now on digital. Now, I will admit, I was pretty excited to see this movie. It was actually in my top 10 most anticipated of Q2, simply based on a poster and the idea of Bill Skarsgård in an action film. The movie wastes no time getting to the action, which is both good and bad. At first, I found the idea of the inner voice of boy that we hear throughout the movie to be obnoxious and silly, but it did grow on me over time. I think the fight choreography is very good. The movie is absolutely blood soaked and it has a frenetic pace that feels just like a video game. I do think seeing this film in theaters would have left a bigger impression on me because at the end of the day, I found the movie to be fun but unable to break much new ground compared to other films with a similar style. At the end of the day, I give Boy Kills World a 6.4 out of 10. Up next is Monkey Man, the directorial debut from Dev Patel, who also stars in it, and he had a hand in the screenplay, and the film is currently available to watch right now on Peacock. Now, I was very eager to see this because word of mouth was strong. Jordan Peele had a hand in the production, and I really enjoy everything I've seen from Patel as an actor to this point. The film is an ambitious task because it is an outright action movie, but it also deals with things like class, race, and mysticism. The movie does take a while to get going, but it eventually gets up to full speed, and by the third act, we're rocking and rolling and really kicking ass. I do think the movie is a victim of the hype train because I was anticipating loving it, and in the end, I just really liked it. Perhaps, though, on second watch, I'll enjoy it a bit more now that I've adjusted my expectations a little more properly. At the end of the day, I give Monkey Man a very good score of 7.4 out of 10. Moving right along, we get to The Fall Guy, which is directed by David Leitch and currently available to watch on digital. Now, this movie doesn't lack sizzle because it's got Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, and Aaron Taylor Johnson all headlining the cast. But the movie had a rough opening weekend and was quickly put onto digital platforms within a few weeks. Though, to the movie's credit, it did remain in theaters and kept a steady pace with some modest box office success. I thought the action was pretty solid, but the overall story didn't necessarily captivate me, as well as I thought the movie dragged on a little bit too long. It's so reliant on Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt's natural ability that it feels like it almost takes their talent for granted at times. The film is safe, it's predictable, and yet it's also a pretty easy recommend since it doesn't paint outside the lines too much. I do think The Fall Guy is a mildly good film and worthy of a score of 7.1 out of 10. Up next was Civil War. This is the latest film from acclaimed writer and director Alex Garland, and it's currently available on digital. Now, you can count me in the army of Alex Garland supporters, whether it's his early writing, like 28 Days Later, or his turn into direction with Ex Machina and Annihilation. I think he's always creating interesting material, even if it sometimes falls short in the end, like 2022's Men, which was a cool concept but poor in execution. Civil War has impeccable cinematography and a brutal, immersive use of sound design. It's a film I wish I would have gotten to in the theater because while I have a good sound system at my house, I think the way the gunshots rip through the scenes would have created an additional layer of anxiety or tension seeing it in a cinema. What I appreciated about Civil War is it doesn't hold your hand narratively and it lets you draw your own conclusions. The problem, though, is this might not work for everyone, but I personally appreciated not getting bogged down too much in the exposition. And it's worth mentioning Jesse Plemons absolutely steals the entire film with his lone scene. It's as incredible as everyone is saying it is, and might just get him an Oscar nomination. The ending also left me thinking about just how dangerously close we are to something like this playing out in real time. This is very much not science fiction like Alex Garland's typical work, but a cautionary tale of what could await us if we don't start unifying as a populace. I think Civil War is a great film and got a solid score of 8.0 out of 10. We then move to the film If, available right now on digital. Now, I really liked the trailers I'd seen with my boys, and I had fairly high hopes considering I'm a Krasinski fan, and I appreciated that he was going to change lanes a little bit and make a family friendly film with sure hands like Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell front and center. My main takeaway from If, though, is this movie is emotionally manipulative and overly heavy handed. For a movie with so many fantastical elements, I think it really lacked the magic it was clearly going for. And this is a significant step down for Krasinski following his Quiet Place films. What surprised me was even my kids seemed to lose interest in the movie over time, which is not a good sign since they are clearly the target audience for If. Even though I personally found it emotionally manipulative and a little bit too on the nose, I do think it's a fairly good movie for the family, and I'll comfortably give it a 6.4 out of 10. The next movie I got to was Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey number 2, which is directed by Reese Frake Waterfield and available on digital. Now, saying I had no expectations for this would be an understatement. The first film from 2023 is still ranking at the bottom of everything I saw in that calendar year. It was embarrassing because it was just going for the quick cash grab on Winnie the Pooh, which had recently become part of the public domain. That movie was flimsy, it was dull, and I'm pretty sure I could have created better masks for the monsters with a $50 budget. I will say though, Blood and Honey 2 is superior to the original. This one at least seemed to understand what it was going for a bit more and embrace how silly and dumb the entire premise is. Is the movie good? No. Will I watch it again before my life is over? Not a chance. Will I watch another film if they try and stretch this thing into a trilogy? And you just know they will. Sadly, the answer to that is probably yes, because at least this film franchise is trending in a positive direction. My final score, though, for Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2 is a 4.7 out of 10, just a touch below average. I then got around to the movie Pool Man, which is Chris Pine's starring vehicle and his directorial debut, and this is currently available to purchase right now on digital. Let me save you a few bucks right away and just say if you like Chris Pine, and I think most of us do not waste your hard earned dollars on this movie. The movie debuted at the Toronto Film Festival in 2023. It bombed on its first screenings, and it's taken a while to release because I think they needed to skim the pool and see if this was something anyone would want to dive into. After watching Pool Man, all I kept thinking about was what better films there were with a similar sensibility that played out in the seedy underbelly of Los Angeles. So if you ever have the urge to hit play on Pool Man, let me just say perhaps you'd be better off checking out 2018's Under the Silver Lake, which is an underrated neo noir comedy starring Andrew Garfield, or you could go to Paul Thomas Anderson's 2014 neo noir film Inherent Vice, which stars Joaquin Phoenix. I can make a promise to you both of those experiences will be more satisfying. My final score for Pool Man was a disappointing 4.5 out of 10. Next up was the film Bratz, which is a documentary about the iconic 80s actors labeled The Brat Pack, which is currently available on Hulu. Now, this movie is directed by one of the members of the Brat Pack himself, Andrew McCarthy, and he looks to investigate and uncover how the name came to be, why it stuck, who exactly ended up under the umbrella of the moniker, and what effect it had on members of the group or those at least close to it. Now, I was born in 1985, so I don't have that many memories of the Brat Pack in their peak during the 80s. But being raised as a 90s kid meant that I fell in love with all of the films the aforementioned actors were in throughout that entire decade. Andrew McCarthy proves to be the ideal choice to direct because he's able to sit down with so many members of the group, including Emilio Estevez, Demi Moore, Rob Lowe, Ali Sheedy, and others, and have intimate conversations. This is a great peek behind the curtain of a group of actors that set the world on fire in the 1980s and changed the direction of Hollywood thanks to their fame and their talent. I think Bratz is a must watch for anyone that grew up in that era and wants to take a trip down memory lane. This film gets a very good score of 7.5 out of 10 from me. The next movie I got around to was called The Last Stop in Yuma County, which is directed by Francis Galuppi and available on digital. Now, this is the story of a knife salesman played by Jim Cummings, who ends up at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere, only for the arrival of two bank robbers to throw the world into chaos. Now, this movie was fun with elements of humor and drama, but nothing really ever grabbed my interest in the first 20 or 30 minutes, which is weird because normally movies that deal with crime and play with the contemporary Western setting and motif are usually right up my style. Now, I think this movie's main issue is it took too long to set up the premise, but I will say, once we get to the Mexican standoff, accompanied by a great use of an Elvis song and slow motion, the movie kicks into full gear and drives us towards a wild, bleak, and fun end. Thanks to the third act delivering and the film being short enough at just over 90 minutes, this is a solid recommend to most of your movie friends. I give The Last Stop in Yuma County a very good 7.5 out of 10. We then get to a film called The Beast, which is a science fiction romantic drama directed by Bertrand Bonello, whose work I was not familiar with. This movie is currently available to rent on digital. The film stars Leah Seydoux, who is one of the best working actors today. If you have any doubt about that claim, check her out in Blue is the Warmest Color, Crimes of the Future, One Fine Morning, or France, just as a few examples. She is joined by George McKay, who plays the male lead, most known for his performance in Sam Mendes' war film 1917. Now, The Beast is the story about a near future where AI has taken over and a surgical process becomes available where you can go back into your past lives and have your DNA purified of all emotion, thus making it easier for you to get jobs in the future. Seydoux's Gabrielle decides to go through this procedure, and as she does, her paths cross repeatedly with McKay's Louis in early 1900s France, in a 1970s 80s time period, and then again in the film's present day. Both actors are exceptional at playing different character versions as we bounce through time, and though the story takes some time to unravel, once we get to the end, there is a shock twist that truly caught me off guard. This is a dark, twisted film that occasionally reminded me of an extended Black Mirror episode, which is a compliment because I'm a huge fan of that show. Now, this isn't one I'd recommend to just anyone, but if you like mind bending science fiction and are okay with subtitles, I think you'll be pleasantly rewarded with this watch. I give The Beast a very, very good score of 7.7 out of 10. Up next was I Used to Be Funny, which is a Canadian produced drama directed by Ali Panku and available on digital. Now, I turned this movie on with zero idea what it was, and solely based on how much I like Rachel Sennott. She's great in Shiva Baby, Bodies, 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 and Bottoms. She makes very clever choices with her film work so far, and this continues that trend. The movie starts out and we find Sannott's character Sam is a stand-up comedian who also works as a nanny for teenager Brooke and Brooke's father Cameron. The movie takes an unexpected turn when Sam's comedy is seen by Cameron, and the raunchy nature of it leaves her in a vulnerable position that turns into something ominous and, unfortunately, all too familiar for women these days. This is very much a post Me Too movie that I admire for what it covers, even if it's scattered and lacks focus for the majority of the runtime. The film does leave us in a happier place with a subdued, melancholy ending, but the way it gets here pacing wise could cause some viewers to tune out before we get to the good stuff. If you like Rachel Sennett's acting, it's an easy recommend. For others, though, it might be a little harder sell. I do give I Used to Be Funny a pretty good score of 6.8 out of 10. Moving right along, we get to Hitman, the Glenn Powell starring film, which is currently available to watch on Netflix. Let me begin by saying all Linklater is good Linklater. The movie tells the story of a real life person, Gary Johnson, who was a humble teacher by day, but who works with the FBI undercover by night and poses as a hitman to entrap and catch people. This movie moves at a cool, breezy pace, perhaps Linklater's most generally captivating film since School of Rock all the way back in 2003. Powell is a full blown leading man at this point, soon to explode even more with Twisters, which releases in July. He starts the movie off very well, playing a dorky teacher that has to don disguises to portray Hitman with his targets. But as the movie unfolds, his natural charisma starts seeping its way out. He's joined by a relative newcomer, Adria Arjona, who instantly brings screen presence with her beauty and her charisma. Her character enters Powell's world when she looks to have her soon to be ex husband killed, only for the two of them to start falling for each other. The two lead actors have immediate and electric chemistry. And as Gary's worlds start colliding, the movie naturally and deftly shifts tones from romantic comedy to something a little more sinister and unnerving. It's so effortless, though, because we are in good hands with an acclaimed director like Linklater. The movie constantly took turns I didn't expect, and though the ending comes rather abruptly, it felt earned to me. This is a movie I'm probably going to find myself rewatching with the regularity of other favorites from the director like Dazed and Confused, the Before trilogy, and the aforementioned School of Rock. Hitman is a very good film and gets a comfortable and solid score of 8.2 out of 10. And last, but certainly not least, was I Saw the TV Glow, the recently released and acclaimed A24 film, which is currently available on digital. Quite honestly, it's hard to even begin to explain this film, which was directed by Jane Schoenbrunn. I recently saw a poster for it that states it's a surreal art horror that speaks to lonely teenagers, past and present. That right there is a far better description of the movie than I could have ever possibly mustered. The film is abstract as hell. It's visually stunning with a color palette of neon pink, purple, and green just popping through the screen. The film ultimately, I think, is about loneliness, isolation, the dangers of nostalgia, and most importantly, one's ability to accept themselves for what they are rather than just the skin they were born in. Now, this is not the type of film that's easy to subjectively review or score because it's far more about feeling and emotion rather than any semblance of narrative structure. I think this movie is going to be one that's hard to break through for most general audiences, either finding it boring or too artsy. But I have already seen it making a big impact, especially with the trans community, for which most of its important themes feel directly tied to. If pressed and I had to assign a score to this film right now, I would probably give it an 8.0 out of 10, primarily due to its sheer ambition and the complete uniqueness of what it does. So, what do you think? Do you agree with any of my reviews, or do you think I'm way out of line with something that I scored? You can feel free to DM me on any of the social media pages at RevAlmanac, or you can email me directly at revisionistalmanac@yahoo.com and leave me your thoughts there. Now, at the time of this recording on July 1st, a new episode of our regular monthly revised Oscars is only a few days away. I was joined for the big mid year special by the entire 1001 by 1 podcast crew. That would be Adam St. John, Britt Reinholds Hobson, and returning guest of the show, Joey Rogate. Myself and my three wonderful guests tackled the 1994 year in film, which of course was the year that Forrest Gump won Best Picture, but also featured many other great films, including Pulp Fiction, The Shawshank Redemption, The Lion King, Quiz Show, Four Weddings and a Funeral, and many, many more. Did the 1001 crew and I agree with any of the wins that year, including Robert Zemeckis for Best Director, or Tom Hanks for Best Actor? You'll just have to tune into that episode and find out. And don't forget, while we make our choices for revised Oscars winners, what goes into the Revisionist Almanac is ultimately up to you, the listener. Every revised category winner made by Adam, Britt, Joey, and myself will go head to head with the actual winners that year, and what you vote for the most across Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Threads gets the distinction of being called the revised winner. So make sure you're following the show on every single social media platform. The more places you follow, the more places you can vote. This does wrap things up for my June watches. I hope you had some fun listening and be on the lookout for more of this series at the start of each new month. Until we meet again, I will see you next time.